I'm going to be restoring this 1960 Ford truck radio. You can tell it's from 1960 by the model number, which is 04BT, the 0 meaning for 1960. If it was a 94BT, it would be from 1959. If it was a 74BT, it would be from 1957-58 model years. You can also tell it's a 60 because the back plate is a bluish color. For 57 to 59, it was black. It was a black back plate. So to start with, just want to kind of a word of caution as you're going through this. You want to make sure you don't damage these threads. This is where the retaining bolts go on, tighten it down. Soft metal, thin threads, it's very easy to strip those or damage those. And I've seen them where they've been broken off before. So just be careful around those. You also notice it has a flat spot on it. That's normal. That's where the bezels will be mounted on there, and it keeps the bezels from spinning around on you. So to start with, let's go ahead and remove the front faceplate. To do that, we'll be removing this screw, and this screw. And after we get that off, we'll also be removing the screw that keeps the one cover on here. And then if yours may have the other screw for the other cover, that's actually on the bottom of the unit. And this is where your ground bracket is attached. So that there might be a screw here. But we'll remove all those. Let's take the covers off, and then we'll do another video here real quick showing you the next step. Okay, now that we got the covers and the faceplate off, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the dial. It's the thing, the orange thing here. Now you got to be careful when you do this. This plate here is very, very thin metal. I think it's aluminum actually. Very easy to bend, very easy to scratch. So what you want to do is we're going to take a pair of long needle nose pliers, and we're going to slide them up underneath, get it up underneath there, and then back on the edge, just pop it up and off. This thing is just pressed, the needle is just pressed on there, and you'll see towards the end of the restoration we go back, how we go about doing that. We set it on, and then we tap it down on and make it firm after we make sure we're on our right position. But anyways, for this, you're going to want to make sure that you support the metal in pretty close to that centerpiece right here. Slide the needle nose in, and then just pop that off, and it'll come right off. You might have to hit it a couple times, but that needle will pop right off, and you'll see just a sec. Okay, now that the needle's off, you can just pull the plate right off, slide right on up, and what that does, it exposes the tuning cam with the dial string. You can see the dial string comes in up over a pulley and then goes to the tuner itself. And you can tell just by looking at this that it doesn't work. This is a half ohm Cupron wire. 95% of the radios that I open up, that wire is either gone or it's broken off like this one is here. You can see the other end of it. It's supposed to be down there. Right? But typical, a lot of rust, a lot of corrosion. But we'll get all that fixed up. So the next step, we're going to take off the tuning mechanism and the cam for it. So we're going to take this screw out here, pull this plate off. This copper piece of metal here will slide out. That shaft will slide that way. We'll be able to drop it through the other side. Then we're also going to take the cam off, and you can see how there's a spring down there that's latched over the edge. You got to be careful on that when you go to pull it off, but basically it goes to this string here, and this is somebody else tried to tie a string on there. That's not a factory string, but I'm going to let that go, and then this will just slide right up and out. And you want to make sure that you keep that spring. You'll need that. Put that in your little bin of parts, but pull this off and just go ahead and remove that. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to fire up our soldering iron, and we're going to come in here to C2, which is the trimmer capacitor located right here on the side wall of the radio. This is the capacitor that you adjust when you attach an antenna for maximum impedance matching of the antenna to the radio, so you get a maximum signal. So there's two wires on there. One's a solid core that goes down to the actual antenna input, and the other one is the lead that's running to L1, which is one of your first three inductively tuned tanks here on your tuning mechanism. So after we get those two off there, we're going to come over here to the other side of the radio, and we're going to remove, desolder the wires for the speaker output And then we're going to go down here, and the slip-on lugs for the emitter and base of the transistor, we're going to just pop them off. And then we'll be ready for the next step. So I just want to point out something real quick on the rear speaker connection. Coming from the transformer, it goes over to the one side of the plug, and that just feeds through and it goes to the ground. So that's actually the ground reference for the output. Anyways, just want to make sure you see that you have to desolder it from the chassis itself and then from the plug. Okay, just a little bit of a disclaimer. You know, we're going through the process to for a hobbyist to be able to go in and rebuild the radio to get it functioning, if you will. But you never know what you're going to run into when you buy these radios off of eBay, or you get them from Craigslist, or you pick it from a junkyard or what have you. So, like on this radio, there's some telltale signs. You know, first off, we talked about before how the Cupron wire was broken off, and that's pretty typical, and we've got a fix for that. But then you look over here and you see the charring on the output transformer, which is T2. The reason that is someone's been in here. You can see, because I've been through these before, but some of these wires down here, they're not supposed to be on that side of the printed circuit board. It's supposed to be on the other side. You flip it over, and here's where, well, in the Navy, I would call this a sailor alteration, where someone tried to go in and bypass that Cupron wire that had failed. And what they probably did is they did that, and they didn't adjust the output current, and it fried the whole output section probably. So we'll take a look at it. We'll figure it out. But just want to let you know that when you get these radios going through this process, you have about a 50-50 shot of getting a working radio after you get done. Okay, continuing with the disassembly of the radio, got a few more things we're going to take off here. This retaining clip and the screw, we're going to take that off. This is your input primary power cable, the 12 volts DC coming in here, the plus 12. So somebody put a black cable on here. Typically, you know, your hot cables are red. So we're just going to cut this cable off, and we'll put a fuse in there so that the radio is fuse protected. That comes in, and it goes to a plate down here, which is a spark plate. You know, if the truck gets hit by lightning, it's like 400 picofarads. But it goes through this coil here, which creates a field, some filtering, and then goes to the input power switch. But we're going to go ahead and desolder that connection right there. We're going to remove this. We're going to take that wire out, and then we are going to go to the bottom, and we're going to remove the solder and remove the 4 clips that are retaining the board in place. All right. Okay, when you go to remove the coil here, that goes down, and that's soldered to that plate there. So you want to hit that with a soldering iron also, and just remove this entirely out of the way. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare to take this back plate off. We have to remove the screw here, pull the lead off, put the screw back on it. These hold the transistor in place. Go ahead and put that back on. We're just going to take this off right here, and then we're going to take these 4 screws off here, and then that back plate will just drop right off. Okay, so we've taken the 4 screws off. We've taken the little lead off the screw here. You want to make sure you keep the plastic retaining sleeve, if you will, in there, and then this whole thing will come right off. Then what we want to do is we want to spin the radio around, and you're going to see the tabs here holding in the on-off volume control and the tone controls, and you want to very carefully and slowly straighten those tabs out. So there are 4 down here for the tone knob, and there are 2 here for the on-off. Okay, now that you've got the little retaining clips all straightened out, those will push back, and we're ready to take the card out. The PC board out. It should just slide right out. Let's see if I can do it with one hand here. And there you have it. Okay, this is what we got here now. You can see most of these chassis, they come in, there's a lot of rust, just a lot of dead spiders, dead bugs, dirt. You can see the chassis is pretty well rusted up there. Just on that one side, so I probably will only soak it onto one. What I use to get rid of the rust is this Metal Rescue Rust Remover Bath. Supposedly it's very earth friendly. It's non-toxic, whatever, and it does, in my experience, a really good job. So I got some bins over here. I'll take the screws and I'll lay this on the side, just let it soak for like a day, and that'll bring it right off. But you can see the radio is set up. It's got 4 tubes. Takes it down to the audio. Once you actually get the audio output, that's where the transistor provides your audio output amplification to drive the speaker. This is the electrolytic capacitor. It's a dual electrolytic capacitor. We're going to be replacing that. And then down here are a couple other, see if I can get it down here, you can see it. A couple capacitors down here. We're going to go ahead and replace those. These little mica caps, which you see that are like here and stuff, you know what? Those babies never go bad. Most of them are for decoupling. And if they ever went bad, you'd probably never know it. So we probably won't do anything with the mica caps unless we see one that's busted. And then we will check the ohmage for all the different resistors, make sure nothing's really fluctuated. We'll test the thermionic emission on the tubes, and we'll just clean everything up. Probably 90% of this restoration is cleaning. Hey, just a quick tip for pulling these tubes. Let's pull all 4 of these tubes off. You can see this is like a 2-level socket, retaining clip type thing. Puts pressure on it so that way when the truck's vibrating around, you know, the tubes don't drop out. So they're in there pretty solid. So what you have to do is just slide a small screwdriver up underneath and give it a little bit of a turn action and wiggle it, and it'll come right out. Okay, just want to take a quick look over some of the things we found. So this is the output audio transformer T2, the one that we saw from the other side that looked like it had a little bit of charring on it. The reverse side that was up against the chassis, you can see that's really been baked. Surprisingly, it ohms out resistive-wise to still be good, but we're not going to put this back in the radio. We're just going to throw this in a parts bin, and I've got another one that came off a 60 radio, same part number, that we're going to go ahead and use that instead, just to make sure it's reliable for the future. So we're looking at tubes. One thing you want to do is you want to go through and verify that you have all the correct tubes. The tube complement is different for every year. For the 1960, you've got a 12 BL6, and you can see that part number, hopefully, if I angle it right there. Kind of hard to read. This is your RF amp. Then you have a tube. It's a 1286. This is your converter. They put these in a shield to kind of keep stray signals from interfering with what it's got to do. It's got a seam. You just pry it open, the tube drops right out. Then you've got a 12EK6. The 12EK6 is your IF amplifier, and then you've got a 12DK7. Kind of aids in 3 things. Gives you your audio detection, provides automatic volume control, AVC, automatic voltage control, I guess, and also a little bit of amplification for that audio signal. So those are your tubes for 1960. And next video we'll talk about cleaning up the PC card and components. Okay, we're going to take off this RF tuner. You can see that it's all gunked up. These rails, they get rust on them. It makes it really hard for the tuning mechanism to flow back and forth. This one's moving. Some of these I've seen have actually been stuck in place. But we're going to clean those rails up, clean up that little worm gear back there. And what this is it's 3 inductively tuned tanks. So these plungers going in and out of this tank times 3 changes the frequency that the tank will resonate at. So you don't want to mess with those plungers. You don't want to mess with the screw settings on the back. They've been factory set. But what we're going to do is take this off. And to take it off, if you look underneath, there are these 5, I don't see the button there, but should be one there. But there's these 5 connections here. We're going to desolder those, get the solder away from it so that the post coming down from the top can be removed. And then also you've got the mounting brackets themselves are soldered in. So here, and then here and here. We want to get those, get the solder off it, straighten out the pins, and then this whole assembly will lift up and allow us to clean the assembly up better, so we can get all around it. And also it'll give us access to the 2 capacitors down here that we have to replace down here. All right. Okay, and just so everybody doesn't think I have three hands and making this look too easy, I do have a card holder that allows me to rotate the card around to wherever I need to help desolder or solder things in. So it makes it a little easy. Don't know if you need it for a one-time shot, but having a card holder definitely helps the process out. Okay, so we got the RF tuning assembly out. I didn't mention, you probably realize by now, you have to unsolder the one wire going to the tune tank. Anyways, one word of caution on this is you want to make sure you don't damage these wires coming down here. And what we'll do a little later is we'll test, once we get it all cleaned up and stuff, we'll test the continuity across these to make sure they're all good and get everything cleaned up. So what you want to do is you want to get the surface rust off. Try not to mess with the plungers that are going in and out. You know, don't mess with the screws back behind. You can clean the tanks themselves off, the rails, the screw back here, and wipe off the rust and what have you, staying away from the thin wires on the front, and clean this shaft up all the way through its length. There's supposed to be a clip right in there. You can see that clip in there. That's got to be in place, so make sure you have a clip there. And other than that, the cleaning process starts. Okay, I'm going to want to go ahead and start cleaning up the board a little bit too, but I'm going to remove some of the components I know we're going to replace. So this two-part electrolytic capacitor right here, we're going to take this out, and these two capacitors right here, we're going to desolder those as well. And the potentiometer right here and over here, both those are pretty well rusted and shot. I'm going to desolder them, clean them up, see if I can save them. If not, try and find a replacement for those. And that'll give me a little bit more room in on the board to be able to clean things up. Okay, I'm just about done getting things cleaned up and polished up and stuff, so now I'm going to get into testing the components. One of the things here that I didn't show in the last video is I went ahead and just cut the wire for the light bulb. We'll put a new wire on, but we'll have to be very carefully. We'll have to desolder it and put the new end in there. And what happens, that part right there fits down into this. This was badly corroded, so I took it apart and got it in the metal rescue and get it all cleaned up. But basically, what we're going to do now is we're going to start testing components. What's nice about this is there's not a whole lot of parallel circuits in this radio, so you can just put the multimeter across the different resistors that you have. I've done that. My results are here. So these are half-watt resistors, carbon resistors, have about a 15% tolerance is what the tech manual says. So I have the what it's supposed to be, the lower limit, the upper limit, and then what the actual reading was. And you can see that, you know, roughly half of them were bad, and there's a couple there that were close to being bad. And one thing, you know, here's like, this is R4, this is the bias resistor. This is what you adjust to determine how much current's going out through that emitter collector circuit of the output transistor. And that baby was fried. So I got a replacement for that. That should work. That's what it should look like. The other one was badly rusted. Like I said, I was able to put this in the metal rescue, cleaned it up, and I think that'll work out just fine. But anyways, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to you test your resistors, and then I'll take like continuity on the transformers, make sure all that's good. I'm also going to replace this wiring here. You can see I went to the local OEM shop. Couldn't find it in white, but this is 18 gauge. I'll just pull 3 strands off it and rerun it. The lengths are on this radio are kind of short because somebody went in there and I don't know, they decreased the length or did something, but it won't wrap around. That's why they had it across the top. So we'll get that replaced and make it all like new. We're going through the process of replacing the resistors on the board. I couldn't find a half-watt 47 megohm resistor, so I went with a 1 watt. It's the only thing I could find at the time. I guess they were out of stock of the other stuff. But I'm now at a point where I want to show you how to replace that Cupron wire. A Cupron wire, if you remember, almost every one of these we get, they're all burnt up and broken. The heating and cooling of the wire for so many times just makes them brittle, and most of the time they're gone or they're broken. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, and that's a half ohm wire, length of wire. What we're going to do is we're going to take 2 1 ohm resistors and put them in parallel. And basically all you do is just put them side by side, do a couple wraps each side, and hit it with a little bit of solder. And that's going to go in here on the other side of this resistor here, which I believe is R20, and it's going to come to the other side of this wire here. All right, so the resistors will sit right in here. And to show you where that's at on the circuit, here's your Cupron wire. So this is your 12 volts coming in, coming up, the ground coming up through and around through the collector to emitter to the 12 volts, and that's what's coupled over to give the audio out to your speaker. And here's your bias that you set that'll control how you adjust the amount of current through that leg. And you can see where they have the adjustments here on the schematic. 300 milliamps at 12.6 volts is what we'll set it at. And very important that you do that when you're ready to do that, when you first turn it on. That way you don't fry your transmitter, or I'm sorry, your transistor. So I finished putting the resistors on the board, and now I've gone and put the two capacitors here, and then the electrolytic capacitors up over here. And which you can see what I've done here. These are these have a positive and negative side to them, where the other ones do not. So the positives go towards the board here, and then the negatives, I brought them both up over into the ground. So you can see here in the back board, this is the ground channel that runs around the entire board. Right? So here's the two negatives, and here is the positive one from each. Okay, just a little bit of an update. So what I've done is I've went ahead and mounted the two new variable resistors, potentiometers here and here, and then put the wiring on these here. I just brought them this side. This, I believe, is a little later or version of the board, a newer version of the board, I should say. You can see, like right here, here, and right down here, they actually had foil runs going to where these wires that would normally on the bottom would run. And then a lot of times they just solder them, tack solder them to those connections, but these ones had eyelets. So I ran all those. This will go to the front. This one here is power. And we're getting ready to put the tuner back on. We'll get that on next. And then we're going to start looking at putting the tubes on, getting it assembled, make the connections here, and things will start taking shape again. So I'm replacing the components between the tone potentiometer and the on-off volume potentiometer, which also has the switch element in the back of it. Over here on the tone pot, the right tab, as you're looking at it from the back, has two resistors and a capacitor attached to it. That one resistor and the other capacitor in parallel straight over to the center tap on that potentiometer. And there's also a wire that runs up to the top of the volume control over here, and you'll see that once we install it. The other resistor goes down. It's this is actually the bridge between tone and the volume. It's a fixed point on that pot. And then the other capacitor. Now, I didn't replace capacitors. These mica discs, never see them go bad. A lot of them are just used for either a bypass cap or some type of decoupling. And even if they went bad, you probably never know it. Anyways, that's where we are on that one. And you can see up here where I've got the tuning mechanism mounted, and so this is starting to take shape once again. What we're going to do here is we're going to replace the wire leading up to where the bayonet bulb plugs into and makes contact in the assembly. Here's the assembly. It was really badly rusted, so we soaked this in the Metal Rescue along with the spring. And what happens is the spring goes up on there. This fits down. When you clamp it down, it creates spring tension so that when you put your bulb in, it just slides down. The bottom of the bulb makes contact here, and the sides of the bulb, which is grounded, makes contact on the exterior of the holder. So, and there's the cable we're going to use. So here's the bulb holder, all complete. You can see if you tug on it, you get a little bit of spring tension underneath there to hold that in. From the back side, see there's a spring. These two clips here hold the spring in place, and then there's these two tabs, one here and then one on the other side, and that's what holds the wafer in place for the bayonet mount. So the radio's take an 1892 bulb, GE 1892, and This just fits right in here, pushes in, and it secures it. Now we're going to go ahead and start assembling the rear end of the radio, which has the transformer T2 mounted on it. It's got the speaker connection here, and here's where the transistor goes. So as far as transformer T2, let me show you that schematically. It's right here, and you can see you have the brown wire coming in, goes the blue comes down and goes to the ground. And so the blue one has actually two wires in it, and you can see that here very closely. One of them's kind of looking out, but there's two wires there. So when you ohm it out, you need to make sure that these two are touching, and you can go from the brown to the blue to the ground, and then you should be able to go from the brown to the ground as long as these two wires are mated. And when you solder them, you want to make sure you have both wires there, otherwise it won't work. With regards to the speaker connection, if you look at it, there are two size holes, one large, one small. The large one is your ground, the small one is your audio signal. And then if you look on the schematic, it'll also show you, see here, the ground has just a little bit bigger of a circle than what's up top. All right, and then finally the transistor. So the transistor mounts on, and you got two screws that hold it in place. You can see that there are insulators on the screws, and that's because the metal back of the transistor doesn't actually touch the heat sink. There is a piece of nylon or some type of a plastic wafer in between the two, and what you do is you coat both sides of this with heatsink compound, which is non-conductive but has a thermal transfer factor, coefficient that's way up there. So that's to make sure that as this transistor gets hot, it's transferring the heat onto the aluminum backplate. And that's it. I'll show you more in just a sec. So now we're going to go ahead and mount the tone pot and the on-off volume control, and those go right here from the back. It'll come in. You can see the 4 tabs for the tone and the 2 tabs here and here for the on-off volume switch. Corresponds to the 4 here and 4 here. You just want to put them in, give them like just over a quarter of a turn, make sure they're snugged up, and that's all you do for this step. So we're now at a point where we can start reassembling. You can see the controls for tone and on-off volume have been mounted in there. Those are nice and tight. And here's the tabs that we had to turn, the 2 there and the 4 back here. And then over here on the back of the radio, this is the aluminum heat sink. All right, you see we've mounted the transistor. And this is the wire here. We haven't attached that yet, and there's a reason for that. So remember, I told you that the outside case of this transistor, which is the collector, was not shorted up against this back plane here. That's why you have that little white wafer. And the reason we didn't attach it yet is because we're going to put an ammeter in line with this, and I'll show you, I'll draw that out and show you a schematic of what we're doing, how we're doing it. So that way when we first turn the radio on, we can very quickly adjust to make sure that our output current isn't too high where it would start frying things, right? Make a little smoke. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put the card back into its chassis. And then put the back plane on. Now to do this, I want to point out a few things. So here's the tuning shaft. All right, this copper one here, and this little pin right here that sticks out from the end of it, that goes into this hole right here. So basically we're going to turn it this way, it's going to go in, it's going to slide in with that pin aligning, and then you see on the top of the chassis here, you got these 4 holes here, and then you have these right here. All right, so if you look at the circuit card, this is actually the ground that's going around. It's going to ground that chassis. So those are all your ground points, and that's the points where the case is going to be held up against or held to the card. And you do that with the clips here. So basically, you set it in place, you put those on, you shove it down, and they snap right in. The other thing on the back plane, there's 4 screws. One here, 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 and here. Let me see, I didn't have it on camera. There, and there, and that's what you use the 4 screws for, and those go into the back of the chassis. Okay, it's starting to come together. So we're going to go ahead and make the connections at the rear of the radio. Basically, you have this wire here, which goes to ground. It's going to hit this pin here, so you're going to run it through the eyelet, solder it, and then you're going to jumper it over here to the chassis ground. It just makes for another connection. All right. The other one, this is the green wire. Remember, that's the center tap of that transformer, and there's 2 wires in that green wire. That's going to go over here to the connection here. And just in case someone flipped your connector, remember the green wires is your signal, that's the smaller hole, and the ground wire is your larger hole. Okay, so we're going to install this tuning cam now. And the way this goes in is you just slide it in to the hole. Works around in there. Alright, and then you want to mate it up with the disc. So that'll go in there like that, and then you turn it around and you have this piece here that has a couple notches on it. See that? Those fit into these holes. So this just slides over and those notches fit, and then you have this screw that goes in there, and you just tighten that baby down. There you go. And what that does is that makes it now so that the tuning cam will turn. Alright? So what we're doing here is we're wiring up the power that comes in through the on-off switch. The on-off portion of the switch being this back section of the on-off volume potentiometer switch combination. So right here, you've got, this is to the light bulb. So when you turn the radio on, the light bulb lights. And then this wire here, that goes, you remember we put those electrolytics in. So that wire comes into here. And if you trace that foil run around, you can see it runs all the way down to, that's the positive side of one of the electrolytics we put in. And this being the ground, you can see how, remember we put the 2 into the one slot there for the negative portion of those electrolytics. And there's your ground, so you got your ground going through one of the electrolytics, the positive out through to here. That wire goes around to the front. It goes through the on-off switch when you turn it on, and then here's where your 12 volts comes in. So from here to here is where you have a little inductor for like noise suppression, and then that goes out to your fuse and then to your battery. So after connecting up the dial lamp and the power, at 12 volts, it goes out on the other side of the switch. Like I said, this side, that inductor comes in here, goes to one side of the switch. Coming out of the switch, one feeds the light bulb, the other goes to the electrolytic. And then I made the connections for the wires up top. Normally, if you're using the stock wires that came with it, this is the white wire with the black line, the center conductor wire, and then the white wire on the other side. So on this terminal, you've got 2 connections. You got one from that wire harness coming from the other side, but it also has from the center potentiometer down here going up to it. So those 2 mate to that one. Just the one center wire on that 3-wire harness comes to the middle pot here. And then on this pot out here, you've got the outer white wire, and then you have this capacitor that goes down to the tone potentiometer. One thing you want to note is that there's an insulator that they put across that lead so it doesn't hit up against the case of the on-off switch. So we're going to make the antenna connection now as it comes into the first tune tank. Basically from down here, you can see that the antenna plugs in there, and you have like a paperclip type piece of wire that comes up, connects to the one side of this capacitor. Right? And what this capacitor does is it matches the impedance of your antenna to the front end of your radio, just to make sure you're getting maximum signal in. And then, so you have one wire, the white wire connects to that same point, and then out of the tank you have the green wire, and the green wire is going to come down here and be soldered into this point right here, which on the other side of the card, you can see that it has, there we go, that it has the hole for it. Now some of the other models I've seen, they don't have this extra eyelet, and so what you would do is just solder it into the connection there. So now we're going to install our tubes. There's 4 different types of tubes that go in here. You have a 12BL6 here that serves as your RF amplifier. You have a 12AD6, which is your converter. Noisy tube, and it can cause a lot of interference in your radio, so they give you a nice little shield to put around that tube when you install it. Very easy, just put tube in and just slide this right over the top of it and push it down. The next tube you have is a 12EK6 that serves as an IF, intermediate frequency amplifier. And then the big tube you see here, that is a 12DK7. That does a couple things. Audio detection, provides automatic volume control, and then also it serves as a first amplifier, audio frequency amplifier going to your output power audio transistor. Now we're going to set up to do an initial turn on of the radio. We need to make sure that we are ready to adjust the output current through the output transistor, audio transistor, the 2N1227 alpha transistor, so that it's not so high, because it's very easy to fry the audio section of these because the bias adjustment R4 here has not been set correctly. Remember, we replaced that component. So we want to make sure we're ready to do that. And to do that, you can look in the schematic. It has you break the connection between transformer T2 and the collector of the transistor. And we're going to put a ammeter in series. Now my power supply puts out, I believe it's 12 volts. We're going to roughly set it for about 300 milliamps when we do that. And what that looks like physically is, here's that wire that we didn't hook up right here. That's that going to the transformer T2. And then we got a little cheater wire here that we hooked up to the collector of this transistor, which is the outside case, and we're going to put a meter in series with it. Now, just kind of a little bit of a refresher, when you're checking voltage, the voltage is put in parallel across the load so that you can read the voltage across that load, whatever's being dropped. And on your meter, it'll have a V, it'll have like maybe a couple dash lines over a hard line, which means direct current. That's what we're working with, is direct current with a battery. But for this test, we're going to go ahead and we're going to break, just like I had on the schematic, that X there. We're going to break that line, which is what we've done, and we're going to put the meter in series with the input from the transistor. All right, so you have to move your lead on most multimeters require you to move your lead over to where it has an A, and then you want the A with the solid and dash line, and that's so you can read amps.
Businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account.
We're going to go ahead and align the radio now to set the output current through the transistor. To do that, we're going to adjust the bias resistor R4. And you can see the measurements are, if your voltage is 12.6 volts, it's 300 milliamps. If it's 14.4, it's 420 milliamps. That voltage is taken off of the one side of those 2 resistors we put in parallel, which replace that Cupron wire. So to do that, currently I have the voltmeter set up and an ammeter set up. So the voltmeter, we're reading just over 13 volts. Which would be just over 300 milliamps according to the book for what we need for output current. To set that current, remember we have to be in series. So we did a little jumper cable here, the blue cable, and that's going to go up through the meter and then back around to the connector that is normally on the collector of the transistor. So the adjustment R4 is right there where I've got my tweaker. It's the little silver round resistor that's right in there. All right, and so I'm going to set it for just over 300 milliamps, or right at 300 milliamps. So when you turn it clockwise, from looking down from the top, it drops it. Before you turn the radio on the first time, you want to make sure that that's set primarily to the right side. So I've got it just about 300 milliamps, and a little tweak there. There you go, 300 milliamps. The radio has no input. The volume control is up, and that's all she wrote. We're we're going to do now is we're going to clean up the front dial lens after 60 years of use and abuse. These lenses often are badly scratched or just hazy. So to get rid of that and clean it up, what we're going to do is we're going to use a headlight restoration kit, such as this 3M one. It has like 3 different levels of grit in there, so you can get it back to where it's like glass. I mean, it comes out really nice. And then once we get it cleaned up, we'll go ahead and refill in the white paint with white lacquer stick. So to remove that lens, basically all you do is you got 3 tabs here. All right, and those 3 tabs, you just push each one of them back, and that lens will drop right out. You want to make sure you don't break those tabs because you need all 3 of them to keep it in there tight. So once we get it out, we'll take some hot water or some warm water and a soft bristle brush, and we'll wipe out all the old paint, and then we'll go ahead and go through the restoration process using the different levels of grit to get from coarse to fine, and basically it'll take it back to being almost a very, very clear finish, and then we'll fill that white paint in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hook up the primary power, which is the 12 volts coming in. To do that, you solder it to the one side of the switch here, and it goes through that inductor. We'll go ahead and we have a fuse, inline fuse that I got from Radio Shack. We'll put that in. This is Radio Shack part number 2701281. It's an inline fuse holder for automotive applications, rated up to 10 amps. We're going to put like a 3 amp fuse in there. The radio itself is rated at 1.4 amps according to the spec sheet. So you want to have a little bit more than that because the initial rush of current when the tubes all start coming up to temperature, if you will, and all the filaments start lighting, it gives it a little bit more current draw than what it does when it's in a steady state of playing. A couple things also here. You want to go get yourself some White Gauges needle paint. I think like Max Auto sells that a lot of times. See if I can get up here, we can get a little better view of it. Where the needles come in, the paint's really kind of shot, but then using the needle paint really makes it look nice. And especially when it's back behind the lens that you've polished, look how nice and clear that is. And that's using that 3M headlight restoration kit. So, there you go. Okay, we've got the power all hooked up now. So we made the connection at the switch coming through the inductor. By the way, I do color up the inductor, make it look nice again with a red Sharpie. And then it goes through. I do put heat shrink around that connection. Okay, our power is all connected. We made the solder joint there at the back of the switch on the one terminal going through the inductor. And then we made the connection here. I use heat shrink around that connection to kind of protect it from hitting up against anything. And then you can see the strain relief right here. We put the screw in, keeps the cord in place and keeps that wire from moving around going through our fuse. Also, that inductor of the cardboard, I do color that with a red Sharpie to make sure it looks nice. And so what I want to show you now is the current draw when you first turn the radio on. So the radio is rated at 1.4 amps. So let's see what we get. And here we go. Alright, you saw it draw 3.19 to start. Now it's starting to drop after that initial rush current. Now this tech manual says it's rated at 1.4 amps. You can see I'm drawing 1.7 with this radio, which is fine. And the radio, as you can see, plays pretty well.
Has worked like Android 400 engine.
And no more squeaking parts. Nick is a
Alright, now I'm going to show you how to put together the mechanism for tuning. You have the cam, the spring, and the string. Basically, the spring goes on the back side, and you have the one section that hooks. It goes around that little tab right there. And then the string goes over that, holds that end of the spring in place, comes down, and then goes underneath into the little slot, just like that. Right? And I'm going to go ahead and install it, and you'll be able to see, once I get it installed, how this catches on the other side, and that's what gives you your torsion to pull the needle back. Okay, it might be a little hard to see, but right here, about 1 o'clock there, you can see that's where the spring latches over the flange there, and then it comes back around. The string comes up, goes over the pulley, and then goes to the knob there on top of the tuning assembly, little latch there. And you can see the cam turns because the spring is causing the tension, and that's what's new. Your needle is mounted to that, and that's what moves that. All right. All right, we want to put the faceplate on now. To do that, we just slip it right over, and you can see the one edge comes up against the bar that's there. The other one goes over the on-off volume control, and then of course your tone is coming up through the center. So then what you want to do is you'll take the needle, and for right now you just want to loosely put it on there, set it there like that, because what we'll do is we'll put this on, we'll put the faceplate on, slide it down, and we'll turn the knobs left and right to make sure that we're hitting right at the 5 and the 16 like they're supposed to be. And then we'll take I use like a nut driver type thing. I set it over there and just give it a little tap, and that seats that needle right where we want it. And then put the plate back on, the faceplate, and that takes 3 screws that we pulled out before, and it's done. So I'll show you the finished product here in just a sec. So I want to show you how the lids go on. First off, on the top of the radio, where you've got the light socket, where your light bulb goes in to cast the light on when the power's on, that actually slides, the cover slides underneath that bracket and locks it into the front. And so it looks like that. You want to make sure that the guides on the side, that the flanges of the cover are in these guides. Now for the top one, there's a screw just like all these other screws that holds that top plate in. However, on the bottom, you want to make sure that you have put the right screw in here. This screw holds the mounting bracket, and that's what your ground comes through for the radio. So you just have the power applied to it, and then as your positive, and then your negative is through the ground through here, and make sure you're in those channels. Right.
Fly, feeling like Ali. We put them all in check so we don't lose money.
For only $19. If you have put off... Yeah.
1960, the answer.